It's your boys Juan y Alonso, or Alonso y Juan, however you want to say it. Juan, how are you feeling after that?
I'm feeling really good. I mean, it was a stress-free ball game. I don't think it could have gone any better for the Dodgers tonight. I think the only hiccup is Dylan Floro continues to get hit hard, and I can't wait until we get into the discussion about what the heck was going on in that seventh inning with Dave Roberts and Victor Gonzalez.
And the Clayton Kershaw, vintage Clayton Kershaw, coming out and dropping the hammer. 6 innings on 2 hits, 1 earned run with that home run to Mr. Kiermaier, 8 Ks, a preposterous amount of Ks, and 1 walk. Two huge numbers there, the 8 Ks to the 1 walk ratio. And kind of like I had predicted in the preview show, I thought Kershaw was going to come out and be 2017 Game 1 Kershaw, and that's essentially what we got.
Yeah.
And he had a hell of an outing. What's your takeaway on Clayton's outing today?
I mean, what can you say? I mean, the guy, he only gave up, 2 hits today?
2 hits, yes.
And here it is. Of course, you have the story with him is that he doesn't pitch well in the playoffs. His ERA is over 4. In the World Series, his ERA is over 5. But you have these games. And what's the difference here? He actually got run support in this game. And when you're pitching with a lead, it makes a difference. I think hats off to Kershaw. I mean, they pulled him after 78 pitches. Let's just get into it. Let's not waste any time. I think Kershaw should have gone at least one more inning because I think it would have been easier to just cover those last 2 innings than have to cover 3, especially with Kershaw only having 78 pitches. And he's going to go again in Game 5. He's going to go again in Game 5 on regular rest. So it's not – I didn't understand why you were saving him. You just got to go in there for the kill. This is Game 1 of the World Series. I want to make sure that these Rays know they don't stand a chance against the Dodgers.
And for those of you joining us here on the Dodger Beat After the Game show with Alonso and Juan, the Dodgers take Game 1 8-3 with Clayton Kershaw getting the win. And an efficient start by Clayton, as you mentioned, the 78 pitches. Now, where I'm going to disagree with you on them prematurely pulling him, I feel like Dave pulled him because he felt that was the right time to pull him. And I'm cool with it, in part because they're not focusing on the analytics. They're going on feel. And for me, that's key because if there's one thing we've seen historically with Kershaw's postseason number in the pitch count is roughly about 75 pitches. So them pulling him out in that 78 number, which is, by Kershaw standards, relatively pedestrian. But all things considered, he had the lead. He did his job. He kept them in the game. And at that point, I think it was also a testament to trying out the bullpen component going into the World Series. And in part because you need to be able to find out who you can count on when it comes in crunch time. Because these Rays, they're good, right? We all know how good they are. We talked about it in the previous show. It's been all over the national media. They're legit, and they had little glimpses, if you will, into that, right? And they effectively were able to contain their big guns at the top of that lineup. But at the end of the day, with Kershaw also getting out as early as he did, we also have to remember that they're trying to rest the rest of this staff, if you will. Granted, Walker Buehler is going to be coming off of a day less of rest. Tomorrow, everything's indicating that it's going to be a bullpen day. So it's one of those things where I was cool with it and I was comfortable with it because, again, they're not focusing on the analytics and the stats and they're focusing on the feel. And it's something that you and I have definitely advocated for, that they don't need to focus on those tests or stats rather. And in some cases, they overcoach and overmanage. And then that's what gets them into sticky situations and get a little cute. And no cuteness tonight. They went for the gusto and they got it.
But so here's my thing, though. Talking about that feel, after that first inning, he was dominating. He was, what he had, I think at one point had retired 11 in a row.
Yes.
I just think, if he can get through that 7th inning. Now, if you start him in the 7th inning and he starts to get into trouble, then you pull him. You had that luxury because at that point, you had like a 5-run lead. Now, the only, and look, we're being very picky. At least I'm being very picky here because it was a great game for the Dodgers. I just would have loved to have been able to get through this game without having to use Victor Gonzalez, without having to use Baez, because I think you're going to need those guys tomorrow in a bullpen game. Now, then again, if Dylan Floro would have done his job, it's a mute conversation. So maybe it's more on Floro, but 78 pitches and the way Kershaw was going through that lineup, I would have tried to squeeze at least one more because, again, I think it's easier to cover those last 2 innings with the Dylan Floros, with the Kolarics, than we saw not only Victor Gonzalez and Baez, but we saw Joe Kelly too tonight. And what was a little nervous is that bullpen, even though they turned out to be outs, they got hit. I mean, the bottom of the Rays lineup seemed the one that was doing the most of the damage tonight.
No, and like we talked about in our previous show, this lineup is a good lineup. We talked about in the NLCS how Kenley was put in those situations where the bottom of the lineup was a little more pedestrian. This lineup is better. They're a lot better. They're a lot deeper, and they showed that tonight in going out and doing what they did. I will be honest. There's 2 things that surprised me tonight. I was surprised that they went to Floro right there. In my mind, I actually thought, regardless of the lead, that they were going to go probably Kolaric just to kind of get him those reps. So I was a little surprised by that. And on the flip side, on the Rays side, I am there's no words as to how surprised I am, I guess, as to Tyler Glasnow throwing 112 pitches. I'm surprised.
Let me just stop you there because I want to give you credit. We had this conversation off camera, and you had told me, you said the Rays coaches don't care about how they use Glasnow, the pitch counts, if they're going to use him for 4 innings. And seeing him throw 112 pitches, I just kept thinking, you called it. These guys are just going to run these guys into the ground, and they don't care.
Yeah, no, I mean, their whole thing is they use their pitchers not as starters or relievers, but as who can get outs. And that's the philosophy of the Tampa Bay Rays, organizationally. And again, the Dodgers incorporated that a little bit into the Dodger culture, but not as much because obviously they have a little bit deeper of a farm system where they can have your traditional starter reliever situation. But interestingly enough, tomorrow, we don't know who the Dodgers starter is. And hopefully here while we're on air here, we'll find out. And for those of you joining us, by all means, chime in, tweet at us. Our Twitter handles are here on the bottom. @DodgersBeat is the other Twitter handle. If you're watching us on the Periscope Live or YouTube, please leave a comment, drop a comment in there. Tell us how you're feeling after tonight. And I'm kind of curious to get a feel from the Dodgerverse outside of the Twitterverse, if you will, just because as we all know, Twitter is a deep dark place sometimes. So I'm just kind of curious to get a vibe from all of you Dodger faithful out there. But huge night again by Mookie Betts. My pick to be the MVP of the series. And I mean, listen to this preposterous stat. Mookie Betts steals 2 bases and has a walk in the same inning of the World Series game. Only one other player has ever done that, and that was Babe Ruth. The other part of that stat that's weird, both of them did it after they were traded from the Red Sox. So it's one of those things where, I mean, Mookie showed tonight all the intangibles, that the base stealing performance that he put on, that's a clinic for anyone that understands baseball fundamentals and just the hustle. Because the thing is Mookie Betts is so fast that I don't think most people make that tag the way that he did, especially with how awkward that play was. So all credit to Mookie there. But I mean, they came out playing small ball, which is exactly what we wanted to see. They didn't rely on the home run ball. Obviously, they had the home run by Bellinger to get it started, but they didn't rely on it for the remainder, if you will. They just tried to manufacture runs where they could. The walks were huge tonight, and now we're here. How are you feeling about the offense tonight?
I thought it was fantastic. It was a total team performance, and that's the thing that I love about this team is every night it's a different guy. Corey Seager had a quiet night tonight. Mookie Betts steps up and sets the table. I can't say enough about Mookie. For Mookie to steal that base when everyone in the stadium knew that he was going to steal that base, and they still couldn't get him out. Maybe it says more about the Tampa Bay pitcher's inability to hold a runner. But then that play that he scored on at home, that secondary lead that he took at third base was the difference. That's the reason why he was able to make that run, score that run. And I just, the fundamentals, I guess I find it surprising nowadays because it seems like not every baseball player is fundamentally sound. That when you see a player have fundamentals, it's like Tim Duncan in basketball. It's just like, oh, wow, he's amazing. No, it's just he is fundamentally sound, and that makes him a very good player. So I think Mookie was great. It's nice to see Cody Bellinger go deep again. So you're hoping maybe, if Corey does have a quiet series, maybe Cody will offset that. So, and my pick to win the World Series MVP, Will Smith, with a big hit there in a situation that was able to break open that game.
No, and aside from Corey Seager being a little quiet, again, one guy that we talked about that we wanted to step up to the plate, if you will, no pun intended, was Max Muncy, and he had a quietly great game today, going 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs, the 1 walk, and obviously we know what the 1 walk created there. And it's one of those things where if the Dodgers are playing at their best, as Clayton Kershaw just said, nobody can beat them. And I firmly believe that. I mean, is there components to these two teams that are comparable? Absolutely. The defense is a push, et cetera, et cetera. But the Dodgers, when they're out there going 100% and they're playing their best, that's one of those the intangibles, if you will, that no one can touch.
Yeah, I mean, look, you and I talked about this. We thought it was going to be a close game. I didn't expect to see what we saw tonight. I mean, the way Glasnow was pitching at the beginning of that game, I was texting a friend of mine who's a Yankee fan, and I was just like, I mean, did the Yankees get any hits out of this guy? Because I just felt this guy, he was like untouchable there in the beginning, and I thought, oh, we're going to be in for a rough night. This is going to be a close game that's going to go on into the late innings. But do you really think that it was just a matter that the Dodgers just wore him down in those middle innings?
I think they did. It's not that I think he was tired. I think is like we talked about in the previous show, is they had to get to the pitchers as far as rattling them and making them uncomfortable, and I think the Dodgers did just that. They made them uncomfortable. And it gets to the point where that starting pitcher kind of starts to question their stuff, their location, et cetera. And I think that's kind of what was going on. They rattled them, they roughed them up a little bit. And that's kind of what the Dodgers needed to do out, coming out and getting the hit party going, right? They just needed to it's in boxing that the philosophy of those body shots are money in the bank, right? That's essentially what the Dodgers did, with getting on early, stealing those bases, and that's another thing too, is the base stealing. Everyone in the stadium knew, including them, because they had a mound visit about it, and they still weren't able to prevent it. So again, when they're firing on all cylinders, this Dodgers team is super hard to stop and super hard to contain. And really, the only way you can is you kind of have to come back and punch them in the mouth. So we'll see how the Rays respond tomorrow with Blake Snell. It looks like all things are pointing to a bullpen game. It might be Dustin May and Urias again. Dustin May opening, Urias, kind of eating the bulk of those innings. They could do the Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin thing again. So I'm kind of curious to see how that goes. But if this offense carries this into tomorrow, as long as they can give those guys a lead and hold on to that lead, that's going to go a long way. Because I mean, even tonight, in that ball that Joe Kelly hit there, or rather not Joe Kelly pitched in the ninth, that was for sure gone. Cody was able to bring it back in. Obviously, there was concerns of the shoulder, and I think it's fair to say the shoulder's okay.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where
but he is favoring it, because you saw that ball that went off the heel of his glove out in the outfield. I think he would have caught that if he wasn't worried about his shoulder. So I do think it's in the back of his head, but hitting wise, it didn't seem to affect him.
Well, I mean, they're for sure worried about it, because there was no Crash Bros celebration. It was all feet, feet. So it's for sure going to linger. But I mean, if you've ever had a shoulder injury that's weird like that, it's just always there, right? It's going to linger in the back of your mind. But it's good to see that the Dodgers are playing like the Dodgers of old, and that's not that long ago, the regular season, that this is the team that we expected to see in the postseason. And like I said at the end of the Game 7 post game show, with the Dodgers kind of getting everything clicking at the right time, it's exactly what they needed going into the World Series. And especially if they can get the win tomorrow, it's going to be a huge, huge pad, if you will, because they have that day off. And with any sort of momentum in baseball, even a day off can kind of throw it off. So it's going to be key that I think that they come out and be aggressive again like they were today and get that win. But back to your boy, Will Smith. He had himself a quietly good game as well. And and as far as, doing those fundamentals, doing the little things, he was doing the thing. But he also, I mean, again, he just DH tonight, so I think that's a huge part of it as well. But again, I mean, he's hot. I mean, there's no other way to put it. That dude's he's raking and going in. You know how slowly, it kind of has picked up to where we're at now. And again, like you said, Corey Seager had a quiet night tonight. Two at bats. Was able to get the run in, but again, 3 walks, very quiet night. But those walks were important as far as kind of getting everything to where we're at. And Chris Taylor had himself an all right night too. Had 2 hits. Again, we talked about that in the previous show. We were worried about the ankle, and here we are now. So I mean, great overall game. And Kike Hernandez again coming huge with the super sub pinch hit right there. Again, I think he's stating the case for himself to remain a Dodger. But if he doesn't, he's going to get paid somewhere. And it's looking well in his favor.
Look, I mean, it's just if you're Tampa Bay, I get it. It's just one game. You got to throw that out the window. But how discouraging must it be that you were able to shut down Corey Seager tonight, but you still lost, and you lost by 5 runs. And I mean, Chris Taylor looked like he had a good game. Hopefully, that's a good sign to come for the rest of the series. But I think it's really important that the Dodgers won tonight. Not only did they win because Kershaw was on the mound. Now Kershaw is 3-1 in this postseason. So again, that narrative that Kershaw doesn't deliver in the postseason, hopefully that'll be a thing of the past. But now the Dodgers have a game in their back pocket. Even if they don't win tomorrow, I think if they can find a way to just go, if Gonsolin and May can give them innings tomorrow and they can go through tomorrow not having to use Urias, I think they're set up beautifully to close out this series over the weekend. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but you're going to have Buehler going on Friday. If you can then follow Buehler with Urias on Saturday, and then you have Kershaw in a closeout game, I mean, you have a good chance. I'm curious to see what the adjustments the Rays do facing Kershaw a second time around. But I think it was crucial that the Dodgers won this game today and, in a sense, kind of, announced their arrival that they're for real.
Well, and the thing about, too, with the Rays is they came from this series where they were up 3-0, and then the Astros pushed them to the brink with Game 7. I kind of alluded to it a little bit in our previous show, and I wanted to save it more for tonight if the Dodgers won. If that's kind of in the back of their mind, because again, the psychological side of baseball is, there's so much that's there. And that's one of the things that I think may be lingering a little bit, where there's a little bit of self-doubt, if you will, because Glasnow, for the most part, Glasnow has had a pretty solid year. He's a solid pitcher, but again, he got roughed up a little bit today. And again, they rode that horse, into the ground, and now we're here, right? So it's one of those things where I'm curious to see if they don't win tomorrow, if that's kind of that psychological component of like, oh no, like we had to come back, even though being up on these Astros, and now, and again, the Dodgers, even with what the Astros have right now, the Dodgers are still the better team, and obviously you can't compare the two, but series to series, when you take it one game at a time, one inning at a time, at some point you're going to have a little bit of doubt. And again, I'm not screaming, the alarm bells, if you will, for the Rays, because they are a good team. But at some point, that psychological component is going to come into play with those guys.
I also wonder if, they've played 2 more games than the Dodgers. And I just want, especially the way they use their pitching staff, if they're not starting to feel the effects. And I think that's why it's huge that they weren't able to put the Astros away in 4 games, 5 games. because you might see now those relievers are starting to feel the effects of those previous series with the Yankees and the Astros.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I thought that they used Glasnow the way they did tonight, because of how much they've used their bullpen in the last few days. Because again, everyone had that day of rest and they had a travel day, so it's kind of a push there as far as that goes too. But at the end of the day, if you're taxing your bullpen as we've seen with these Dodgers, it can be cumbersome, because then you don't know who to go to. And that's kind of what I'm curious to touch on next. Tomorrow, let's say they go, Dustin May, Gonsolin, and Odias for that game tomorrow, bullpen game. And again, we know what happened the last time they used them, and it's a day less of rest, if I'm not mistaken, for all of them, if they're going like on the traditional rest schedule. So it would be their bullpen day. Let's say they get into a little bit of a jam after Odias and they have to go to the bullpen. In that situation, we obviously saw Floro today, and we saw Victor today, and we saw Joe Kelly today. As you alluded, Victor had a bit of a rocky start, but he was able to redeem himself with that fantastic play. And then Floro was suspect, is the only word that I can think of. In that situation, I know that I already have an idea of the name you're going to go with, especially since he didn't throw today. But who would go for you tomorrow in that situation?
Well, that's the luxury that you have, right? Because you didn't have to use your big guns tonight, right? So and Blake Trynan has already shown that he can give you 2 innings. And considering that you're going to have the off day on Thursday, if it's a close game, I think if the Dodgers can go for the kill tomorrow and it's going to take Blake Trynan giving you 2 innings, go for it. I mean, we didn't use Trynan. We didn't use Gratterall. I know Kenley's been pitching better, but I'm telling you, I think it was this victory was huge, and I'm picking at it, but I just, if Kershaw would have given one more extra inning, we might have saved people. I was fully expecting to see Alex Wood in the game actually tonight, since I thought they were going to treat it as garbage time, but they got the win, and that's all that matters.
No, and again, I'm actually surprised they didn't go to Kenley in that situation. I was fully expecting Kenley to come out there and be used in that, just because it is kind of considered garbage time. But especially, interesting stat that ESPN just dropped. The Rays have now had 8 or fewer hits in each of their last 10 games. And the only longer streak spanning those postseasons was by the Yankees in the 1921 and 22 World Series, which was 13 games. So that's an interesting stat, just because against these Dodgers, if you're going to make mistakes, etc., obviously you have to capitalize on them, because if the Dodgers are clicking in all cylinders, there's not going to be a lot of mistakes. Tonight the big mistake was Kershaw leaving that slider kind of hanging over the plate.
Yeah.
And Kiermaier took it deep. At the end of the day, that's just a bad pitch. But like we've said time and time again with Kershaw, if he's giving up home runs, as long as they're solo home runs, then we'll take it, right? And thankfully that it was just a solo home run. And then those, we ran into the issue there with the other situation. And by the way, congratulations as well to Kershaw. He's now second on the all-time postseason strikeout list with 201. That's a super elite list. So congratulations to him. Again, that goes to all the postseason haters of Mr. Kershaw. That's elite company there. So him and Verlander are the 2 guys. I mean, that's what else and more can you ask for Clayton? And I'm not going to nitpick at it either. I was comfortable with him being taken out there, because knowing these Dodgers as well, there's going to come a time where they're going to think of using him in relief if there's a closeout situation in the next couple of days. So, and if he's on in cruise control like he is right now, which he's very loose, even for how competitive and how jaw face he is, even on his start days, he's super loose, and that's the Kershaw we need. And again, that's where I think having those guys like Mookie Betts, having those guys like Walker Buehler on your roster, make it so a guy like Clayton can be super relaxed and doesn't have to burden himself with the brunt of having to carry the team, if you will, to these sorts of things. Obviously the stars aligned where he was going to have the game 1 start, and I had texted a friend of mine that's a source, if you will, and he just kind of asked me, like, in passing, hey, how do you think Clayton's going to do tonight? In my opinion, I think the best case scenario was using him in game one because he's starting with a clean slate, doesn't have any pressure on him if they're pitching from behind in a series or anything like that, because he's able to come out and just be just Clayton Kershaw jaw face and just drop the hammer. And that's precisely what we got out of him today. So hats off to Clayton for doing the thing. On the flip side with the Rays, I'm kind of curious to hear your take. This is the first time you've actually really seen them this year, and you kind of got a little bit of a glimpse into them. How did you feel about what you saw and some stuff that you took away from this Rays lineup?
I thought I was really surprised by the bottom portion of their lineup and how they were able to put some good swings on our pitchers. Now, just some of the stats, though, that I'm hearing, and we covered this on our preview show, if you take Randy Arozarena out, they're hitting under 200, and you saw that in the game today. They strike out a lot, and I think their offense puts a lot of pressure on those pitchers. Those pitchers need to be perfect in order to get through games. So if this keeps up, I think this has got to be good for the Dodgers. There was a stat, and I wish I memorized it well, but I think based on the average, their batting average in the postseason, I think there's only two other teams that either had a lower batting average than them in the postseason, and it was the 19 Astros and then the Indians. And both of those teams ended up losing the World Series. So, again, I think it's posing well. It is only game one, so it is time to, pump the brakes a little bit. They hit like that because maybe Kershaw was just that good tonight, and it looked like it. He only gave up 2 hits. So I am curious to see how they come out against our bullpen tomorrow. Because if the level of pitching is not up to the form, maybe these guys get back into the series and they're able to tie it. But I was very encouraged. Like I said, this is not what I expected. I thought the Dodgers did in that first inning, I thought Kershaw did a great job of pitching around Randy. It's like, we're not going to let you hurt me, and they're going to make someone else on the Rays beat you. So I really like that approach, and I can't wait to see. But I want to talk about this before we run out of time. What happened in that 7th inning? Has Roberts addressed yet? Because it seemed like Victor Gonzalez just got up, and then 6 pitches later, he's in the game, and he wasn't ready, and he looked flat out there. And I kind of felt bad for him because I felt like he got hung out to dry in that inning.
I was concerned, because that wasn't the Victor Gonzalez we're accustomed to. Obviously the Floro outing concerns me as well because he'd been so good. And then we get to now and there's just, I don't know if it's rest. I don't know if it's, and again, we have to remember he was also left off the wild card roster. So, yeah. There's a lot of, caveats with him as to what may be causing that. And I don't know, but, I'm concerned because again, we've beat the bullpen to death throughout this postseason on each of these shows. And, it's one of those things where it's kind of hard to figure out what chess move, if you will, Dave is trying to do there. I'm sure he's trying to do some of it by feel and some of it by analytics. And that's kind of like the stark contrast between pulling Kershaw when he does and doing it essentially by feel and then going to the bullpen the way that he does. And now Payne. So it's one of those things where I'm kind of interested to see, what he decides to do tomorrow, if any of those guys get caught up. Because again, Urias went 6, right? And we know he can go, 5, 6, however long he needs to go. With May and Gonsolin, if they can give us 2 to 3, then and quality 2 to 3 innings, then we're in business, right? But after that, you have Blake Trynan, who's turned out to be a little bit of more reliable than we initially thought he was going to be in this postseason. Gratterall has been kind of wishy-washy. That's the unfortunate thing with him. And Kenley's the only other guy, that's not Baez who's had, consistent consecutive outings, right? Joe Kelly, I think, did well tonight, all things considered. He's closed before, so I get why they went to him in that situation. But it's obviously, with his sporadic control, that could turn into, that could backfire real quick. So I am concerned still about the bullpen woes, especially against these Rays, and especially like you said against the bottom half of the lineup. Because Kiermaier is the dude that started the damage in that bottom half,
Yeah.
and they all were able to kind of they put solid wood on the ball, and just kind of like the proverbial put bit down on the mouthpiece and push through. So I'm kind of curious to see who they would go. If I were to make a prediction right now, who they would go, I would suspect to be Trynan. I mean, I can't. Baez has been also inconsistent, if you will. So that's the only reason I'd be a little worried with him. But Trynan, is the only other arm. But what's unfortunate there is everyone outside of that dude is a little suspect.
Yeah. No, it seemed odd to me in that inning because Pryor had just made a mound visit. And then for Roberts, after they announced the pinch hitter, for Roberts then to come out, it just looked like Victor Gonzalez wasn't ready to come in. And I was just dreading it because, again, I felt like this is something that we talked about in our preview, and that is overthinking things. I'm just like, why? And I think maybe Roger was the one who had said it in our text messages. It's just like, why has this happened? This is so unnecessary in that seventh inning. I'm also curious if Roberts took Kershaw out because it was the seventh inning and the history of the seventh inning with Kershaw.
No, I mean, and again, the psyche of the game is an interesting thing, and like we've talked about in our previous show as well, is I would love to be in Clayton Kershaw's mind just to kind of see what runs through it once he gets to certain points in certain games that we know have been historical issues. So it's one of those things where it's kind of interesting to see, them pulling him when they did, but also to me at least, the optics of it were by feel, and it wasn't, really related to a whole lot of anything else. Which again, if that's the case, I'm cool with it. The thing that I'm concerned with though is if they are doing the matchup thing with guys that realistically haven't seen the Rays, in the recent past, if you will, kind of how they're coming to that conclusion of the upside, right? And again, with Victor, I do feel bad for Victor. Like you said, it does feel like they definitely kind of made him bite the bullet, if you will. And Floro just was kind of rocky, and they're trying to get him out of there as quick as possible. But again, it's just going to be super interesting to see kind of how it's dealt with. And let's not forget, Mark Pryor doesn't really make a lot of mound visits. So if he's making a mound visit, something isn't right. And aside from something strategic that they're trying to figure out, which is seldom because they always have a game plan that they go into that inning with, that is a little concerning, right? So I mean, again, we beat the bullpen to hell and back, and here we are again talking about the bullpen game one of the World Series.
Well, yeah, because I just feel that, the Dodgers are using the bullpen as a weapon because they're not getting that length out of their starters. And you've mentioned this many times. It's just, I think we all have to, especially us old school heads, we just have to just come to terms with the fact that we're no longer going to watch games where pitchers pitch complete games. That is just a thing of the past. It's never going to come back. It's not going to be like Hershiser, where Hershiser pitches 9 innings. We're just not going to see that. So the bullpen plays a crucial part in every single game. So, yeah, I get it. It may sound like we're beating it into the ground, but this is how the game is now. The game is just like, give me enough and get. I mean, I remember Ozzie Guillen always used to say to all his starters, at least 6. I don't care if you're getting killed. You're going to give me at least 6 innings so you don't kill the bullpen. But it doesn't. Even that now seems ludicrous. It just seems like, all right, give me what you can give me, and then I'm going to go to the bullpen.
Well, the rich irony is guys like Ozzie Guillen aren't in the game anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. The game has changed. I mean, I can't remember who the starter is for the life of me now. But the last time that the Rays had anyone pitch a complete game for them was in 2016. So, that's just kind of the state of the game. I bet you there's a similar stat for the Brewers. I bet you for a bunch of other teams that are like that they use the bullpen as a weapon. And not to say, and again, let's not knock. Let's to clarify, we're not knocking the bullpen being used as a weapon. You want to utilize every single weapon you have on hand to win. Because at the end of the day, if you win, that's what's important. And just an interesting stat. I'm not huge into these particular stats because that's why we play the game. But it's just kind of fun when you 3 years. So, anything that you can kind of use as motivation, if you will, I'm all for it. I'm not huge into those stats, but those stats are kind of cool when they come out, just because I know there's someone keeping them out there, and it's kind of cool to come across. But you know what? All in all, the Dodgers had a great team win. Obviously, aside from the bullpen component, it was that part was shaky, but the offense is firing on all cylinders. And like we talked about in our previous show, that's what the Dodgers needed to do. The thing that I wasn't expecting, you went to it a little bit as well, I was not expecting this many runs.
Yeah.
So, all credit to them, and they were able to contain that top half of the Rays lineup. And like you said, they pitched around Rosarena, and again, great story with that dude. That dude has a hell of a story. Boat ride from Cuba to Mexico for like 8 or 9 hours. Plays in Mexico, plays in Tijuana, plays in Navajo, Sinaloa. Or Navajo, Sonora, and then he's in the show. So I mean, it's those are the stories. That's why I love baseball, because so many of those stories. Yasiel Puig is another one of those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Did the same thing. So I mean, it's one of those things where that's the beauty of baseball. But again, they had a hell of a time out there, and they were able to even really get to that bullpen that, again, we talked about was a little gassed of the Rays. And they forced them to give up some hits. They forced them to give up those 2 hits. But the other thing is they forced them to give up walks. And that's what you need to do in order to manufacture runs, especially in the World Series. So looking ahead to tomorrow, we know for sure that the Rays are going to throw out Blake Snell. As of right now, the Dodgers haven't listed anyone as a starter that I can see. They just announced him. Tony Gonsolin starts game 2. Interesting. Not surprised, if I'm honest with you, because it was either going to be him or Dustin May. Now that we know,
do you think they went with Gonsolin because of those first inning jitters from May in the last game?
I think so. I heard them say that the reason they went with Dustin in the first inning, the last go around, is because he knew who he was going to pitch to. I didn't necessarily believe that, just because a lot of guys, they have, especially with the Dodgers now, they have a game plan. So they give you that game plan, and you're good to go. So I kind of called BS on that. I just think the reason they maybe did it is just to see if he could handle actually starting a game, to see if they would be able to potentially use him as a starter. Obviously, that gamble didn't necessarily pay off, and here we are. But with Tony has had a low-key pretty good outing as far as this postseason goes. He had what you would consider a quality start in the postseason. He was able to keep him in the game, and obviously we now know the outcome. So I'm not. I guess I shouldn't say I'm overly surprised, but if it would have been one way or the other, I wouldn't have been surprised either, if I'm honest. But what I will be surprised is if they don't use Dustin after they use Tony for 2 to 3 innings. If they go like straight to Julio, I would be surprised if they did that. Likewise, if they didn't use Dustin at all in the game, I would also be surprised, because they've always touted his kind of rubber band arm, if you will, to be able to come out on short rest or what have you. So interesting there. But I know, from what you've heard of Blake Snell, how are you expecting this offense to kind of react to his stuff and what the Dodgers are up against tomorrow?
I'm a little concerned, and that's why, again, I felt like this first game was so important. It's because of the left-handed pitching aspect of it. You saw what Max Fried did to the Dodgers in the previous series. The first time that Alex Mentor faced the Dodgers, you saw what left-handed. They seem to still have a difficulty pitching. Hitting off of left-handed pitchers. But I expect to see A.J. Pollock in the lineup tomorrow, so that hopefully will offset it. Like I said, it's going to be interesting these next, especially tomorrow, because after that you're going to see Morton, and Morton's breaking stuff concerns me. You saw what Morton did to the Dodgers in 2017, so if they can just find a way to steal that game tomorrow, I think they're in really good shape.
Someone just asked on the Twitterverse if was today more about the Dodgers being this good or were the Rays off? If I'm honest, I think it was a little bit of both. I think the Dodgers, I've been saying since the last couple of games that the Dodgers have been firing on all cylinders and working on all cylinders since then. The only I was concerned about the day off going into today, that might have an effect on them. Obviously, it didn't be here because here we are. I think the Rays were thrown a little off, in part because the pitching that they had seen was definitely not up to the Clayton Kershaw standard. Clayton had a hell of an outing. This is the Clayton Kershaw that we're all expecting him to kind of be in his golden years, if you will. Being able to locate the ball, mixing up his pitches, making the zone go up and down, and he was definitely confusing guys. And again, he retired 11 in a row, so he still has it. It's just a matter of him kind of being in that role and getting in that groove. And again, he had that iffy first inning, and then after that he settled down. So that's kind of what I expect also tomorrow out of Tony. Blake Snell's an interesting dude. He has a really awkward long delivery. He has great stuff. Blake Snell is one of those dudes that I was kind of hoping the Dodgers would have gone after when he was a free agent. Obviously, he ended up in Tampa, and in part because he has the stuff. That's why I'm still surprised that they kind of look at Tyler Glasnow as the ace and not Snell. But again, the Rays have, similar to the Dodgers, they have their analytics that they focus on. If you haven't watched Blake Snell pitch, I would encourage maybe going on YouTube and looking up some of his stuff, just so you can get kind of an idea of what he is. I mean, his curveball is preposterous. And again, it's not a Kershaw type curveball, but it's still a preposterous curveball. He also has a dirty, dirty slider, and he works both sides of the plate, glove side, arm side, and he knows how to do it. And the other crazy thing is he has heat. He throws 98, so it's one of those things where this dude is going to go from 88 on his breaking stuff back up to 98, and he can work it, and that's where it's going to definitely be a challenge for these Dodgers. But if these Dodger hitters stay as hot as they were today and are able to push through, then I think they can steal the game. As far as for you, who was the player of the game today?
Clayton Kershaw for me. I mean, Mookie is going to come close, but especially the way that game started for the Dodgers with Kershaw in that first inning, he seemed to be overthrowing in the first inning. I felt like maybe he was a little too pumped. There was a little bit of adrenaline going. But the fact that he was able to get out of that inning after first and second and, without any runs, and then from then on, he just bared down, I think that makes a big difference. And, of course, Mookie was huge, but without Kershaw's performance, it makes it, if the other team is not scoring runs, it's a very good game.
So I'm going to go co-players of the game with Cody and Mookie. Just because they both had outstanding games. Mookie with that home run, great to see that. Fun fact that Elias Sports Bureau just dropped on us too about Cody and Mookie. Cody and Mookie are the fifth pair of former MVP winners on the same team to both home run in a World Series game. It's the first time that's happened since Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent both homered in Game 2 of the 2002 World Series. I was there. I was pissed about that, but that's only because I was working for the Angels. But I mean, they're good. That's the thing that we forget about these guys is you have three former MVPs on the same damn team. You have, the Cy Young, winning everything that Kershaw's won. Walker Buehler is going to get there eventually, and just the depth of this team. And if anything, this win shows the resiliency of this team because we can't forget they went from a 3-1 deficit to get to the World Series, and they're showing everyone so far, at least with tonight's performance, and hopefully they keep it up. It's not looking like a fluke. It looks like that it was meant to be in the sense of they know it's their year. They know. I mean, again, we talked about it. They did not panic when they were down 3-1, when all of us were throwing stuff and smoke alarms were going off everywhere. And yet here they are, game one. They didn't even steal it. They went out and dominated the Rays, even though they gave up those 3 runs. And Clayton didn't even give them up. That's the best part. So we don't even have to talk about a deceiving stat line with Clayton, as we've talked about that in the past. And it's great to see that. So, I mean, I think all in all, like I said, it's a great team win. I'm still going to stick to my prediction of a 6-game series just because anything can happen, especially in a World Series. As we know, the Dodgers and the Astros were first to Game 7 because of the same thing. Everyone just being like, oh, it's theirs, right? And here we are. So I think tomorrow's going to be fun because I think tomorrow, even though there's not like traditional starters going for the Dodgers compared to the Rays, I think tomorrow's going to be more of a pitcher's duel than it was today. Because again, Blake Snell, that's the dude you can't sleep on. And I know these Dodgers hitters are not sleeping on him, but they're going to walk in there doing the McGregor walk with all the swagger in the world because of what they did today. Because again, to drop an 8th spot in a World Series game and the first game at that, that's that's something that you all you can do is take your hat off if you're on the other side. And again, I am curious to see how the Rays respond. Not even just the pitching, but the offense, because again, you talked about it, you alluded to it. After Rosarena, it's kind of been a lackluster offense, if you will. And again, we dropped that stat earlier about the lack of hits, so I'm curious to see it. For you, who's going to be the? I'm just going to do this every night. Who are you predicting to be the MVP game tomorrow?
You know what? I'm expecting actually AJ Pollock to do something tomorrow. AJ Pollock has been, quiet, steady. I just feel like every game in this postseason, it's always been a different guy for the Dodgers, and that's a great sign. That's why you have to be so discouraged if you're the Rays, because it's just like, I've had friends refer to this lineup as a murderer's row, but maybe it's not a murderer's row in the traditional sense of hitting home runs all the time, and they just, cut you to death and you just bleed out, and maybe that makes it worse. But I'm so encouraged by the fact that it's a different person stepping up for the Dodgers.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to do this every night, just because it's going to be interesting to see when we look at our prediction. I think that guy's going to be Justin Turner. I think Rojo Chingon, who had a great day today, that ball that he hit off the top of the fence, that was a double, by inches was not a home run.
And how about that defensive play that he made on that short hop?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, a lot of people they just look at JT's age and they're like, oh, he's washed up. The dude still has a lot in the tank. Again, I've talked about it on here and I've talked about it elsewhere, that I think JT is the natural fit to be the DH moving forward, and we'll dwell on that after the season. But the dude can still ball. And, that play that he made at third in that hot corner, that's one of those things where it's that all you can do is like, yo, that's solid defense, and that's elite defense, if you will. And it shows, and the crazy thing is about JT is you don't really ever hear him in the conversations for like the best third baseman in the game. It's always Nolan. It's always somebody else that isn't him. And Nolan, and no offense to Nolan's a bad dude. I still think that JT, in my opinion, is the underrated best third baseman in the game, and tonight proved that. So all the credit in the world to him, but I expect him to kind of pick up that slack tomorrow. He's been seeing the ball better. He's been hitting the ball great, and again, the thing that's insane about that dude, his defense is still there. So that's going to come key against these two teams that when it comes to the defense, we talked about it. It's a push. They're both defensively really, really good. They have their own third baseman on their end that's a low-key guy that can also ball. So, that's whom I'm expecting to have a good day. But on that note, we'll wrap this up. For all of you that have joined us tonight, we appreciate you joining us. Again, the Dodgers take the series lead 1-0, 8-3 against these Rays. Our handles are down here if you want to follow us, if you want to shoot us any questions. Likewise, if you're here watching us, that means you probably follow at Dodgers Beat. So we also do merch. It's at www.bleedlos.com. Go check it out. We have a ton of merch. If you like the Los Angeles versus the World shirts, guess what? We got them. So go and check them out. But until then, please stay safe. If you got to go outside, socially distance, wear your mask. And until tomorrow night, from your boys, Alonso y Juan, stay safe, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.